actually a platform develop power platform. Sorry, Power Platform Solution Architect and Fast Track Recognized Solution Architect from Microsoft. So, Chris, it's good to having you in our session. So, over to you, please.
Cool. All right. So we're starting a bit early, I'm guessing. What I'm
No
going to
problem
do
at all.
is, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Uh, there we go. And you should be able to see that. Can you confirm?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. All right. So let's just make sure I've got the chat open and make sure I can get all the relevant comments and all good. All right. So, hey
But
everyone.
we cannot see you.
Oh, you want to see me? I've got the problem is I'm sitting in a. So I'll give you a wave. Just wait. Hey everyone.
Hey,
I'm sitting in a restaurant at the moment because I'm traveling. So my signal is not great, so that's why I'm going off camera. If that's okay.
no problem at all.
Cool, cool, cool.
Hey, Chris.
Hey Mohammed,
Which
what's happening, man? How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Cool. Yeah, good man. Good, good, good. Apologies, folks. I am traveling, so like I'm literally just chilling in a. Look at this.
No, no, thank you. I totally
Yeah.
appreciate it, and thank you for taking out time. I know you have been traveling in busy day and it's working day as well. So no, I appreciate it and totally understand. So we are all here and excited to hear from you.
Oh, thank you, folks. And you know what? I just want to say a massive thank you for allowing me to move the session up a little bit because, man, I've been on trains and all sorts of things, so it's been a bit of a crazy one. But this is the best place I could find with internet connection, so hopefully it stays.
All right. Okay. So will you be traveling further after the session?
Yeah, so I'm going back to Reading, in the UK. So another 4.5 hour journey. Oh man, it's
Oh
just
my
crazy.
God.
I'm super tired.
And you started 8 o'clock traveling or early before that?
Way earlier, way earlier.
Oh, blimey. All
It
right.
just
All the
happened.
best.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you. And a massive thanks for having me.
And it's a pleasure to have you, Mike.
Oh, sweet. All right. So, yeah, this is it's always a privilege to be with you guys. Like, uh, I've chatted to so many of you in the community and Mohammed especially, and I really love being invited to these things. So it's and when we were chatting about this talk, I was like, oh, I'm gonna try and do something a little different. So hopefully it's all good.
As always, Chris, you're
That's it,
all
my friend. That's it.
excellent.
All right. So this talk actually stems from a session that my friend Carl Cookson and I did at the Microsoft Power Platform Conference in Florida, and we had a lot of fun doing it. So hopefully you'll enjoy it as well. Uh,
Brilliant.
so yeah, and just a huge thanks to everyone who's sponsoring this. I think these events don't get to take place. So Magic, One Dynamics, Microsoft, Stallion Solutions, IT Knox, and Guru Group, huge thank you. It's and like I know it's hard for companies to do this, and you always have to justify spending money and blah blah blah. So yeah, we know that it's difficult. So massive thanks. Um, yeah. So shall we get cracking?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, it's 1 minute. Who is
Yeah.
moderating from the team here, guys?
Yes, it's me, Arpit.
Okay,
Alibaba.
are we good to go?
Yes.
Okay, do we need to stop the recording and start again, or we are good?
So it's continuous recording, so it's already
Cool.
running.
All right, brilliant. Chris, all over to you, man.
Awesome. Thank you, Mohammed. I appreciate it, bro. So anyway, folks, again, thanks to everyone who sponsored this. It's really awesome. Can I tell you, this is the most colorful slide deck I've ever gotten to use. It makes me very happy. Um, so if you would like to ask questions, just check them in the chat. I'll do my level best to answer them. I don't know everything. I wish I did, but contrary to my children's opinion, I definitely don't know everything. So yeah, if you have anything to ask, I'll do my level best to respond, or I'll find the answer elsewhere. Right, and I apologize for the background noise, everyone. Like I said, I'm traveling, so hopefully this doesn't come through too much. Right, so this session, how to inspire makers in your business to create amazing solutions with the Power Platform, actually comes from a session that I ran with Carl Cookson in Florida, like I said. We had a bit of fun doing this where we were trying to figure out like how to get people to build stuff in Power Platform and why they should be building stuff. And actually, it's a bit of a tough question, right? So next little bit about me. Hey, so yep, I'm a MVP, fast track solution architect, and an MCT. So yeah, I've done the rounds and gotten qualified as much as I possibly can. If you'd like to follow on Twitter, go right ahead, or LinkedIn, or whatever works for all of you, right? Yeah. So feel free to go ahead and scan that QR code. And like I said, if you've got questions and I don't get to answer them in the session, feel free to contact me on social media, and I'll do my level best to respond. Okay. So I'm hoping you'll know what the Power Platform is. That's why you're on this call, and Dynamics itself as well. But a lot of the time when we talk about things like Microsoft Power Platform, we talk about tech, and everyone understands technology, right? So the whole idea is that, when we talk about Power Platform, everyone thinks about apps, and that's fine. Apps are cool, but apps are not everything. And the Power Platform is a much, much wider subject that we need to approach. So when I talk about the Power Platform, I talk about an ecosystem, and it's a much wider subject. An ecosystem has multiple apps and multiple flows and multiple pieces of data. And the one thing that's very important about an ecosystem is makers. Now, some of you will understand the concept of a maker. Some of you, this might be a bit new, but a maker is somebody that builds things in a business. So if you think about somebody that has a business problem, like, hey, I want to manage my timesheets or I want to manage expenses, you can get a maker to build you something. And that's pretty exciting, right? So anyone can make things in the Power Platform. But is that the right thing to do? Is it okay to get makers to make things? Is it important? And absolutely it is. The way that we used to talk about it at Microsoft was that makers are effectively the lifeblood for your solution, for your ecosystem. So the more makers you have and the more things they make, the more relevant your platform will be. So what we do is we talk about maker enablement, right? So maker enablement is the way to get makers to build stuff. We also have governance and guidance. So governance being what I would call the ability to maintain and manage an ecosystem, like the Center of Excellence for Power Platform. And effectively, if you think about governance, you're thinking about like process, automation, that type of thing. And then obviously the digital guardrails that everyone knows well and loves. And the digital guardrails are effectively data loss prevention and all that. And we'll go into that a little later. But maker enablement is the key thing. So how do we enable makers? Well, first things first, you need to know what a maker is. Uh, and you need to understand what makers will do. So ultimately, makers will be people in your business that create things and make applications and flows. You need to have a platform. And a platform is effectively where they will be making things, but also platforms for collaboration and communication. So the example I love to give people is that when I build out a center of excellence or center of awesome, as I like to call it, and I have a bunch of people building stuff, I will create a platform for them to collaborate and communicate, normally through something like Microsoft Teams or Yammer, right? And this is effectively your community of practice, and it's where you ultimately define best practice. And then finally, you have your guidance and education for makers. So how do we teach them? How do we get them to build stuff? How do they know what to build and where to build? And that's always a big question, right? Like, where should makers make stuff? How should they make stuff? How do we teach them how to make stuff? Now, some of you on the call will be very familiar with Microsoft Docs. Microsoft Learn would be my guess. And a lot of you on this call are certified and you've gone through all your certifications and gotten your badges and posted them on LinkedIn, which I'm all about. I'm a big badge nerd. So that's really important around guidance and education. But also it's around enabling the makers to understand where and why to make things, right? So it's pretty exciting, right? Now, some of you on this call will be makers and some of you will be admins, right? So my theory is that admins and makers are treated differently. And a maker, again, is not an admin. A maker is typically somebody that's taking those digital building bricks or digital Lego bricks and snapping them together to build a solution. Whereas an administrator is somebody that manages that solution, right? Or somebody that helps manage that solution. Now, Pretty sure some of you on the call play Lego or build Lego or play with Lego with your kids. I do as well. And I kind of treat my kids like some of the similar to the way that I treat makers. I have to make sure that they have a really safe space to create things, right? So, a couple of things that you should be asking a business, or asking if you're a user of Power Platform, asking your administrators. Number one, what is a maker? So, who is going to be what does a maker to you? Is it somebody that writes code, or is it somebody that doesn't write code and doesn't necessarily know pro development? My favorite one is, who are makers? So who are the people in your organization that are going to build things? That's a big question, and a lot of people can't answer this. And if you think to yourself, hey, who are the people that are going to be making stuff? Are they going to be users? Are they going to be IT developers? And a really difficult question is, what will they make? Will everyone be making apps and flows? And will everyone be allowed to use all the data in your company? What will they build? Will they make simple things, or will they make very complicated things? So it's a very big question to ask. Where will they make? Now, this is a big one. Where are they going to make things? Will they make things in the default environments, or will they make things in specific environments? And why will they make stuff? Well, why would they use Power Platform to solve a business problem? And sadly, a lot of people think that it's the de facto response to just use Power Platform, but actually, there are hundreds of low-code platforms out there like Mendix and OutSystems and ServiceNow and Salesforce. So why should they use Power Platform? And how will they build things? How do they know where to make things? How will they create things? Will they learn? Will they try and guess and test? So it's a very, very big set of questions to ask. And unfortunately, a lot of businesses just go blindly into the platform, making the assumption that, everyone knows everything, but actually they don't. And unfortunately, we need to teach people. Now, something I worked out also when delivering Power Platform ecosystems, not just solutions, but ecosystems, is the people that understand the problem the best are best suited to solve the problem. Now, that's pretty crazy, right? So, random guess on the call, right? Let's pick a random subject like, I don't know, first notification of loss. Anyone on this call want to put in the chat? Anyone on this call ever heard of first notification of loss? So it's something very interesting. It's in financial services, and it is something that I ended up doing ages ago. I'm just popping into the chat. There we go. So first notification of loss, something in financial services. Now, sadly, not everyone on this call has ever heard of that. Pretty crazy, right? I'll tell you what it is. Hopefully, all of you have somewhere to live, and hopefully, all of you have insured the place you live, or insured your car, or insured your mobile phone. And when something breaks, when you phone your insurance company, they don't log a claim straight away. They log a thing called a first notification of loss, or an FNOL, right? First notification of loss, or FNOL. And what that means is that they don't create a claim just yet. They log the information, then check your policy to make sure that what you have said matches your policy. Crazy story. I bet a lot of you didn't know that. I didn't know that until I started working in insurance. And something interesting is that when I was working and building these solutions out, I knew nothing about it. But the person that I was working with knew everything about it. So they were the people that helped me make the app, and helped me make the automations, and helped me make the business process, because they understood the problem the best, right? So very important that not everyone in your business is going to be technical, and they are called a maker. Something else about makers, and I love this image, is that a maker is not necessarily, English words, not necessarily somebody who is technical, right? A maker is somebody who may be autistic, somebody that understands how to do user experience. So a maker is not always somebody that knows data, right? And I love this image because a lot of the stuff on the left-hand side here is typically where my brain lives. But actually, I'm very creative. I like to do fun things. My office is absolutely crazy. I have a paint, or like lots of paint splats all over my walls. So I'm quite a creative guy. But also I'm very logical. I like data, and I like process, and I like to understand why things fit the way they do. And a lot of the time in your organizations, you're going to find people of both hemispheres. Now, what's awesome in Power Platform is that you don't need to be super technical to build solutions. You can be very creative. So when I look at things like Canvas apps, Canvas app always reminds me of if PowerPoint and Excel had a love child. And I look at Canvas apps and it's all about user experience and user interface. My brain isn't wired like that. I am very logical, so my apps don't look pretty. It's just because I have no taste. But I know some people like my friend Christine who make beautiful looking apps. So you don't need to be overly technical to work in the Power Platform. And I think that's something that's attractive for makers of all types, is that we don't necessarily need to be overly technical. We can enjoy the Power Platform, or as I call it, digital Lego bricks, like everyone else. So it's very exciting. And I bet some of you on this call are very artistic and really would love doing creative stuff. Like I said, I love going absolutely crazy with colors. And, you know, for me, it makes sense. But there's something in the Power Platform for everyone. And that's absolutely important, right? So when you think about the building the platform and creating these digital solutions, you don't necessarily need to be technical. So like I've said, very importantly, as platform makers and admins, we need to respect the fact that not everyone knows everything, right? So there are makers of different types. Now, there's some stuff that's very difficult, but you have to manage expectations. You have to make sure that your makers are set up for success. So how do you do that? Now, it's a little bit tough, right? Because you have to set the expectations up front. Like, what are people going to build? What will they create? What do you expect them to make? Do you expect your makers to make line of business solutions using things like Dataverse and SQL? Well, maybe, but the likelihood is most makers are going to use tools like SharePoint or Excel because that's what they understand. You have to create a maker journey, a way in which makers can interact and manage the platform. Now, the thing that's absolutely crazy is when I start thinking about maker enablement. I don't know if any of you know this, but the Power Platform in a business literally cannot be turned off. Right? You don't need a license to make an app, which is absolutely crazy. Also, the Power Platform is embedded inherently in every single thing you do. So when you think about tools like Microsoft Office and Teams and all of that, Power Platform is embedded in there. So makers are going to use it anyway. Now let's take a quick peek at something, right? If you have a look at this, this is a standard SharePoint host, very, very basic. And very, very interestingly is at the very top, you've got integrate. And that integrates, I can make a Power BI right off the bat. This is standard, right? Let's go start free. That was logged in earlier. Typical. There we go. So it'll create a Power BI report directly with my data. Let's give that another go. Sorry, folks. Power BI, bam, visualize this list. There we are. So it's built me a Power BI report directly within SharePoint, right? And this is standard functionality. And I can quite easily go ahead and visualize my data really quickly. Power Platform is also directly embedded with Power Automate. So if I say create a flow and I say you're going to send an email, very, very straightforward. Everyone in pretty much any business has the ability to do this. What it'll do is it'll use the flow template. Let's just re-authenticate. It'll use a standard flow template and allow me to make a flow. Like I said, it is embedded directly in Microsoft Office. If I go ahead and I say I want to build an app, no worries. Create an app. Test. App. I'm going to give it a random number. It'll go ahead and create an app with my data. So what you're seeing here is the fact that anyone can use the platform. Anyone can make stuff. So your makers are going to be using the platform, whether you know it or like it. It doesn't matter. Makers are going to make. They're going to use the Power Platform. It's very much like an office tool when you think about Excel or Word. Now, what's also interesting, like I said, is that to make an app, you don't need a license, right? To run an app, you need a license. To make an app, you don't need a license. So Microsoft's idea here is to make sure that anyone has access to the Power Platform in the same way they have got access to their Microsoft Office tools, right? So users will be able to access that information. And like I said, if I were to remove the license, you would not see Power Apps here, but you can still go to make.powerapps.com and you can go ahead and build an app. All right. So that's a heads up. A couple of other things is what is realistic. So sadly, a lot of people think that the Power Platform is the hammer that bangs in every nail, and it's not all the time. There are some solutions in Power Platform that don't work. If you think about external facing solutions using things like Power Portals, I personally struggle with Power Portals because they don't solve all of my problems. So a lot of the time, I know people that use other third-party solutions like Portals Connect or even React to build external-facing solutions. Things like Power Automate. Absolutely, Automate is amazing, but it's called Power Automate, not Power Integrate or Power ETL. It is about syndicating data between points, not about changing the data. So when I start thinking about Power Platform, I start thinking about the fact that there are certain tools that solve certain problems. One of my favorite sessions that I did recently was at the Nordic Summit, right? And when I start thinking about what is realistic, I'm going to tell you something very interesting. Microsoft are not very good at making stuff from scratch. So they basically reuse the things that they've built before in a certain way, right? So I'll give you an example. When you think about Power Automate came from a hackathon, right? Which is absolutely crazy. So Power Automate actually came from a hackathon, and it's built on top of Logic Apps. So when you as a user or an administrator think that a organization is going to be using Power Automate to do data integration, I'm sad to say, but you're likely going to be sorely mistaken. And that's purely because of the fact that Power Automate is meant for process automation, not as an integration tool. So probably going to get myself into trouble for saying that, but hey, it is what it is, and that's my opinion, right? Also, what really matters is the fact that data is really key. Now, I'll show you something interesting, right? Check this out. This is the presentation that I did at Nordic Summit. This is the Microsoft stack. A lot of you are Dynamics users, a lot of you are Microsoft 365 users, and a lot of you are Azure users. All of the tools in the Power Platform come from those areas of the stack, right? So the Power Virtual Agents is effectively the bot framework. Power Automate is effectively Logic Apps. Power Pages comes from Dynamics and was purchased by ADX Studio. Dataverse comes from Microsoft Dynamics 365, as used to be called XRM, and also is underpinned by Azure. Power Apps comes from Dynamics, right? Power Apps Canvas Apps comes from Microsoft 365. So like I said, all of these areas of the platform, Microsoft have had for years and years. So you need to be realistic in the fact of what they can do, right? Another good example is being realistic. A Canvas app is not always going to be a line of business solution. A Canvas app actually has very limited functionality and scope. As an example, Microsoft recommend that you don't have more than roughly 500 components per app or controls per app. I recently worked on an app with 5,000 controls, and it was it was struggling from a performance perspective. A couple of other points is around digital guardrails. Some of you will know what I mean when I say digital guardrails, but effectively digital guardrails are the tools. Ooh. Sorry, folks, had a little bit of an internet drop there. Um, Nathan's put in the chat Logic Apps for ETL. I'd agree basically, but I think Data Factory is a way better ETL tool. So the important thing here is having things like your digital guardrails to make sure that people behave themselves and don't break things in the platform. Now, what do I mean by digital guardrails? Well, let's kind of think about kind of a top level view. In order to make sure that all of our makers have the ability to manage all of this stuff, right, and behave themselves, we need to put in a thing called a center of excellence. Now, this is the mistake that every organization I've spoken to makes. They think that a center of excellence is installing the Microsoft Center of Excellence toolkit, and it is not the case. A COE is not a static entity. It is a living, breathing thing that needs to grow consistently and constantly. So if you just install the toolkits and think that you're done, my friend, you are sadly mistaken because you are not, right? Unfortunately, a center of excellence requires people and process and technology to maintain and manage. And when I think about all the people that work on the Power Platform journey and on the journey they're on, everyone's in a different place. Everyone is in a very different place. There are some organizations that have 1 or 2 apps and flows, and some organizations that have thousands. But every organization that I talk to doesn't understand the concept of making sure that the center of excellence is consistently and constantly given attention. You don't just install it and then walk away. It is way bigger than that. And a center of excellence involves a lot of things. The center of excellence involves people. People make the world turn. People make the center of excellence turn. People are the ones that keep the COE running. So they are effectively the lifeblood of the center of excellence. Without people, it is pointless. You have process. The organization management tools such as governance, compliance, risk, all sorts of things, operations. Those tools or those kind of areas within process are the things that effectively make the organization run. Very, very key, very, very important to a center of excellence. And then finally, technology. Like I said, Microsoft loved talking about the COE starter kit, and it is exactly what it says on the tin. It is a starter kit. It's not to be installed and left. The technology enables the process and the people. So when I start thinking about what a center of excellence looks like to enable my makers, well, it can be a number of things. So as an example, this is a very straightforward center of excellence team. Now, these may be skill sets, not necessarily roles. So you might have a solution architect who is also a functional maker. You might have an operational person. You might have an architectural person. And as I kind of run through the process, what does my COE look like as it grows? So in stage 1, you'll probably have a center of excellence owner. The center of excellence owner is really important. There's somebody that will own and be responsible for the COE. You have a workforce planner. You have people like environment managers, business analysts. You will have deployment managers that manage ALM. And as you go through the process, the more use cases you generate and the more things you make, the more people you need to help manage the COE. Now, sadly, a lot of the time in low code, people discount the fact and they think that the COE will run itself, and I can categorically tell you it will not. So you do need people to maintain and manage your center of excellence. Very important. The other thing that's really key is, well, when you're putting in a center of excellence and you're determining the type of makers in your business, I create these things called archetypes. And an archetype is the type of person that will be leveraging the Power Platform in your business in various ways. So you might have a user, and a user is somebody that's going to use applications. So they won't ever access make.powerapps.com. They'll probably access the solutions via a launchpad. Now, very importantly, once again, as I've said before, not everyone needs to log into make.powerapps.com. So users will typically access the information or applications via other mechanisms. So maybe through Microsoft Teams, as an example. Really, really great way to get information and manage your the things that you're doing. Another good example is what we call citizen developers. Microsoft call them sit devs. I'm not overly fond of the term because I kind of think like, anyone can be a citizen developer, but it's a bit like demeaning. I just want to show you something real quick. Sorry, just adding in trying to get a screen to load on the side here. Oops. Sorry, folks. There we are. Cool. Sorry, got something loading in the background. So a sit dev is somebody that's probably going to be accessing make.powerapps.com, but will be limited to the type of environments that they're accessing. What I call an IT dev, or somebody that understands the tech, I typically call them business technologists. And an IT dev or a maker, an experienced maker, is somebody that's typically going to be accessing make.powerapps.com and building solutions there. You also have what I call IT developers for the global team. So IT devs in the global team will also be the types of people who are interacting with the Power Platform, but on a global level rather than a local level. And then finally, you've got your IT admins. So again, not every organization is going to be the exact same. What you will find that every organization has got their own set of requirements and solutions that we need to kind of map to, right? So I'm going to give you a quick example of a little app launcher. So if I was a user, typically I wouldn't need to go to make.powerapps.com. I would launch Microsoft Teams, access my app launcher from here, and I could go ahead and launch my applications. Let's go ahead and open my benefits management app. There we go. Here's all my benefits. Pretty good. There we are. Here's what I'm paying in every month. Very, very basic. The user of the apps is never going to go to make. They should not. You should actually, and they won't be able to anyway. The other thing that Microsoft have done, which is pretty cool, is based on security. They've also started releasing this environment filter functionality, so you can kind of see what environments you have access to and why. So I can see over here, I've got a Power Platform hack production environments, and if I wanted to, I could go ahead and run that and make my solutions there. So it's very dependent, right? So where am I making stuff? As I kind of progress through this whole thing, and I've got my archetypes, I need to think about governance and guidance. Now, my favorite thing in the world around governance is that governance is always parallel to guidance, right? So the more guidance you give, the less governance you have to put in. So effectively, guidance is the way we lead business users and developers and IT pros to behave, right? So we would guide them into the fact that, hey, you don't build everything in defaults. You might want to build things in another environments. Hey, don't use Excel as a data source because it's not a real database. Hey, SharePoint lists aren't all about relational data structures. They're very good for basic things and not super complicated stuff. So teaching makers what to make and where to make and enabling them in that way. The easier you make it, for the makers, the better they will perform. Another thing that's really key is the complexity of the solution that you're building. So I always say to folks, if you're a citizen developer, it is highly unlikely you are going to be building massively complicated solutions like this one over here, your mission critical use cases. You may have a solution that grows up into that. Like as an example, you may develop a timesheet solution. And that timesheet solution is for your team. So you may start out at the very lower end, but it may grow up into something a little bit better, which means that you may need to rethink the data source and rethink the security. So I call this t-shirt sizing, giving makers the ability to understand the category of what they're building. Now, as I said before, not all makers are the same. There are varying grades. So a maker that's building for your personal productivity or team productivity environments, they're typically making much smaller solutions. Whereas a maker that's got IT dev skills and understands how to write code and how to build data structures, they're typically doing these two things over here, right? So what I learned is that the better I define my makers and the better I define my solutions, the easier it is for makers to understand where to build. Which brings me to my next point. Where are they making stuff? So this is a typical Microsoft slide that I nicked. And you can see that we're talking about environments. And environments are effectively digital containers, right? So think of an environment as a place where people build stuff. So over here, you can see that I've got my various environments, and each environment serves a different purpose. The default environments is typically the primary environment. So anytime you create something in SharePoint over here, or you randomly build an app, that is likely going to land up in defaults. 99% of the time, makers don't care where they make stuff as long as they make stuff. So we need to help them understand where to build things. So environments matter, and they matter a lot. So building out your environment strategy is really key. But you need to understand things like geography. As an example, if you are in Germany and you are building solutions, you may not build those in another environment outside of Germany. And every tenant has got a default environment, as I said, so beware of the defaults. An environment strategy is not always about dev, test, and prod, right? That's not it. An environment strategy can reach way, way further things. So if I look at this very, very basic example of an environment strategy, you can see that there are lots of different types of environments. So over here, you've got country environments where I have got what I call a team productivity environment. And the team productivity environments allows my makers to build in there no matter who they are, but they may not use premium data structures. Whereas if I've got an environment for a specific set of departments, I may have prod, dev, and test, and my global environments may be different. So every single time I implement the Power Platform, one of the primary things I do is do a t-shirt sizing model to figure out what people are making, and then try and help them understand where to make them. Also did something pretty fun for this organization is I built these things called environment cards. And an environment card is a summary of what you see over here. So if you think about your developer environments, these are free environments that you can spin up. Here's an environment card that describes that developer environments. For country environments or team productivity environments, you can see that this is a very different card. It talks about the types of solutions you can build. It talks about the costs to the organization, as well as things like your environment access and maker audience. So who will be making things in the specific environments? it is very important to control where people make, right? Because you will run into foul play like data rules and localized policies and things like that. So very, very important. Always do your level best to control where people make things, right? One of my favorite discussions is around data policies. So data loss prevention. Everyone loves a good chatter on data loss prevention. I've had a few very interesting discussions around this in the past. And one of the things I realized actually is that most organizations, well, a lot of organizations don't understand that Power Platform DLP is different to Microsoft 365 DLP. Uh-oh. And that's pretty crazy, right? Let me show you something. I'm just popping up another screen. There we go. Cool. So if you look over here, my internet is very slow, my friends, so I apologize. If you look at make.powerapps.com, and eventually this will load up. Let's close that. And I go to policies and data policies. As you can see, I have no data policies in here. These data policies, this data loss prevention is different to the Microsoft 365 one. So if you block it in Microsoft 365, it does not mean it is blocked for Power Platform. Okay. Beware. That is a big, big, big deal. Okay. So like I said, just because you block it in M365 does not mean it is blocked for Power Platform. Okay. So thinking about things like data policies, I have a rule. And my rule is all connectors are guilty until proven innocent. And always put it on the background of stones because that means it means a lot more, right? It's very moving and emotional. But all connectors are guilty until proven innocent. And what I mean by that is I don't trust any connectors. I really don't. I found out that I've worked with connectors in the past where the data was leaving the localized area I was in, going to the US and then coming back, which is not okay. Some of the data that I was working with was not allowed to leave localized areas, and therefore the connector was illegal and I was not allowed to use it. So I needed to block that. Now, luckily, Microsoft do put a lot of information out on the connectors that they've made or using. And I get pretty excited about that because every single time somebody releases a new connector, I go ahead and take a look at it. And actually, I need to review those connectors all the time. Now, when I start thinking about data loss prevention, there's a couple of thoughts that go into my mind. We need to think about what people are making. Once again, what are you building? If you're building applications that are very, very basic, you don't necessarily need to use all those complicated SQL and Dataverse connectors. Unfortunately, some connectors cannot be blocked, like Dataverse, and you have to be very careful. Here's another thing to remember. When I go ahead and build out my environment strategy, a lot of people don't like Dataverse because they think it's expensive. Sadly, my friends, every environment that you build will need Dataverse, whether you like it or not. You say why? Well, the reason is because even if anyone creates a thing like an approval flow, it will automatically install Dataverse in your environment, whether you know it or not. So just go ahead, get it done, create Dataverse in your environments and continue. Very, very important. But like I said, DLP is very, very key. So understanding the types of connectors you have, what connectors you're going to be using and why will allow your organization to kind of manage the expectations around data, where to put data and why it's there. If I go back to my environment slide and I take a look at this strategy over here, these team productivity environments that you're looking at, so these ones over here at the very bottom, will not use premium connectors. The reason they do not use premium connectors is because that comes at a license cost. But these environments will. So when people are accessing my production environments as a user, remember the license is consumed at the app use, not at the app creation. The people using those apps will need licenses. So I need to unlock those data policies. I need to make sure that those connectors are unlocked from a DLP perspective. Very, very important. So have data policies and have DLP for each environment so that your makers are enabled and can build safe solutions, right? It's pretty cool when thinking about applying the DLP policies. So I have this rule and I say I call it business blocked. So when I make a DLP, and I'll actually show you one very quickly, when I decide I'm going to build out a data loss prevention solution. So if I go here and I go new policy, we'll call this Chris test. Okay. I can't spell, please don't judge me. And I go next. You can see that you've got lots of connectors, right? Here's a little tip. Select them all, right? And you can go, okay, cool. What are the available ones there? Fine. go ahead and do a quick search. So I'm going to go and filter by ascending. And what I will do now is I will say blockable connectors, yes, apply. I select the whole bunch and I go block. Okay. See all these ones over here? So let's go ahead and clear the filters. These connectors are non-blockable. You cannot block them. These are absolutely imperative for the use in the Power Platform and in Microsoft Office. So what I normally go ahead and do is I scroll through them, and I'm like, you know what are really important to me. So most of my users are going to be building solutions on SharePoint and Dataverse. So I'll go ahead and I will move those to business, and then I'll leave the rest in default, right? So approvals always go to business. Things like Dataverse Legacy, OneDrive for Business, Power Apps notifications, really key. Microsoft Outlook, Microsoft Teams all get moved to business, and the rest are not. So this is the approach called business blocked. And what that means is that when somebody goes ahead and builds a connector, builds an app, they will not be able to use the worst connector of all time, the Twitter connector. Okay. So very importantly, they will not be able to use that in apps and flows in those specific environments. I'm going to show you something else very cool. Watch this. I'm going to go ahead and move this to non-business. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at Twitter over there. And what you can also do is you can kind of start messing with the connectors, right? So I can say, you know what? I'm going to block the ability to post, and I'm going to block the ability to retweet, but I'll allow all the get functions, right? So all the get stuff is fine because I'm absorbing information, but I'm not sharing information. So I can actually configure that connector based on the actions, right? So very, very clever little tool, right? Anyway, let's get back to what we were going on about. So DLP is your friend. My favorite one in the entire world is security. Now you probably think I'm going nuts, but security for me is one of the most important things in the Power Platform. And remember, security in Power Platform is not the same as security in Azure Active Directory, right? So don't make the assumption that just because you blocked it in Office, that it will be blocked in Power Platform, because that is not the case. It is very, very different, right? So I love the security functionality. I think it's a really, really great key thing. Something to bring up very quickly is that when I start looking at connectors, connector security behaves differently. You do need to know the difference between what I call implicit and explicit connectivity. Implicit connectivity is effectively you put in an API key and a password and anyone can access that connector. Explicit connectivity means that you are connected via your AD username and password, and that's how you are authenticated, right? So very importantly, security for connectors can work quite differently. So resource permissions for apps and flows also a little bit different. But when you start scrolling up, right, you will have AD conditional access. You will have environment roles. And remember, environment roles work a little differently depending on if you do or don't have Dataverse. You'll have your resource permissions so you can share apps and flows with people. You have your Dataverse security roles, which I'll take you through very quickly. And then you have cross-tenant security. So you can actually put on tenant isolation and block people from accessing stuff, which is quite cool. Something to remember, my friends, is that if you are not using Dataverse inside your environments, you are bound by the two Microsoft security roles that you get as environment admin and environment maker. You have no control over these security roles, and there is nothing you can do to change them. So very importantly, you need to think about this and remember this. A great question in the chat, by the way, is there is a question around what is your strategy around the default environment? How do you stop makers from using that? I don't stop makers from using that. I encourage them to use the defaults because you cannot turn it off. So you may as well call it personal productivity, but you can block app sharing in the default environment. So only allow makers to make things for themselves. Okay. And also I put a hugely, hugely constrained DLP on default. So I basically put SharePoint into business with Dataverse, and then I put everything else into non-business. And the reason I do that is so that makers cannot share Excel and SharePoint data between them. So they're constrained, right? But yeah, there's no point in even remotely trying to block the default environment. It will not work. So let them build, just manage and maintain that using the Center of Excellence toolkits. The biggest, I would say, myth in the Power Platform is that defaults is bad. It's not bad, it's great. So yeah, just use it. Anyway, excuse me, back to the security piece. When I start thinking about security, Microsoft have given me these two roles without Dataverse. Is that okay? My answer is no, it is not okay. I use Dataverse in every single environment, and purely because I can maintain and manage my roles. right? So if you have a look, when you start thinking about no Dataverse, those are the two roles. With Dataverse, you can actually change and edit those security roles to an extent, right? Which is really cool. So I'm going to show you something quite awesome, right? Let's just get my little demo screen back up. Wabam. Okay. So like I said, I have the rule. It's called Dataverse by default. So every environment that I create has Dataverse. When I take a look at my users, um, you have the ability to map a security group to an environment. Okay, so you can see I've not mapped a security group, but I can map a security group. So if I would like to, I can just type in the word governance. And what will happen is that these users will then be synced up to my environments, right? Only those users. It is your first line of defense. Okay, I use it a fair amount. The second thing that I do is I love the security of the security stuff available in Dataverse. I think that is very, very useful. Oops, let me just get that back. I think it is very, very useful. So let me give you a quick peek at this, right? You can see you've got your users, teams, and security roles. I'm going to go ahead and open security roles, and I am going to go ahead and look for environment maker. I probably should have just searched for that. There it is. Okay. Now, if I go in and say edit, this normally takes a few seconds to load. Here's a fact. Your security roles, you can edit what people do using a security role inside your environments. How's that, my friends? Also, the only security roles that allow a user or a maker to see environments, there are only 3 security roles that allow makers to see environments. These security roles are as follows. You have your environment maker security role, okay? You have your administrator security role, system admin, that one, and then system customizer. Those are the only 3 security roles that allow a maker to see your environment list. You can hack this. You can share this URL with somebody who is not a environment maker, and they can get into the environments. Uh-oh. Yep, then you're going to read that in a docs article, are you? So I can go ahead and copy this URL. I can share it with a person who has no security role, and they will be able to get access to this environment. Here's something else very fun. ake.powerautomates.com. So do you know, because these are 2 separate teams, so Power Apps and Power Automates, you will likely have more access to the environments over here than you do through Power Apps. Again, red flag for users, just keep an eye out for that one. Okay, so security roles are your friend. Something else you need to remember is that in an environment UX, so you can see this is my environment user experience, I can go new app and say Canvas app. In my security roles, I have the ability through customization to change what people can do. So I can stop them from building Canvas apps in an environment simply by turning this off. Okay, I can also stop them from executing Power Automate flows. Okay, there's flows over there. I don't want you to run flows in my environment. No worries. Turn you off. Kapow. I can stop you from making model-driven apps. I can even stop you from accessing Dataverse or the solutions. So just because you have Dataverse in your environment doesn't mean people are using it to store data, right? So again, back to the discussion. I'm using security roles to empower my makers to make things in the right place. So even though I may have access to an environment, doesn't mean I can make things. A word of warning, my friends. If you edit the default security roles and Microsoft do an update, the role may not persist and it may change. Another word of warning is that you may not edit the security roles. Well, you can edit the security roles directly in defaults, but again, if Microsoft updates it, the change will not persist. And even if you edit the environment maker role in defaults and you say no one can build a Canvas app, that does not apply. You can block people from sharing Canvas apps. This one over here. So I can have this completely turned on and then turn this off. So people may make Canvas apps, but they may not share them, and that will work. It actually blocks you from sharing the app. So the question in the chat, once again, if I go back to what was said, for defaults, I block people from sharing apps in defaults, but I have to maintain and manage this when there's an update. Anyway, I'm kind of flagging on time here, so I'm going to go a bit quicker. Another strategy that I have is when I start looking at the environment strategies, I use a thing called teams groups or groups teams. It is the worst named thing in the Power Platform, but what it lets me do is actually go ahead and build out what I would call a team in the Power Platform. So if I go back, no, don't create a new role, bad Chris. If I go back and I go to my settings, what I can do is I can go ahead and select users and permissions, go to a team. I can create a new team, call this test team, right? And in here, I can select the business units. I can assign an admin. I'm just going to use myself. And I can select a team that I would like, so AAD security group. And I can go and select one of my AAD security groups. So I'm going to type in governance experience. Go ahead and create my groups team or teams group, whatever we're calling it this week. And I can assign it security roles as well. So if I would like to, I can go ahead and say, hey, all of these people are going to be system admins. So the moment the user logs in and they open up that environment, they are assigned that security role through a groups team, right? So I'm actually enabling my makers. So remember, end users, AAD security, Dataverse, groups, teams, user roles and permissions, and then the platform. A couple of last things around the Center of Excellence starter kit. So a really great way to get visibility as to what's happening in your organization. So the COE starter kit is a great way to get information and understand what's happening. This is a very old slide by Nicholas Kerman. So if you can get Nick on Twitter, go ahead and let him know that you've seen this. It's been updated since then, but the starter kit is a really good way to get access to information and see what people are doing. And finally, when I start thinking about the whole maker enablement piece, remember, because all I've done is I've taken you through what a maker is, how to enable them, what the digital guardrails are with environments, security, and data loss prevention. But I also have a set of rules for makers, and I call it my maker code of conduct. And the maker code of conduct is really, really important, right? So number one, respect other people's creations. Make sure that when people build stuff, you respect what they make. Treat people like superheroes because they really are superheroes. Help with IT governance and guardrails. So if you spot a problem, let people know. Help your fellow makers. So if people are making stuff and you can help them, do it. It's great. Remember, you don't know everything and you can't know everything. Like I said, the only person that knows everything in the world is my wife. Always reach out for assistance if you need help. Give assistance where you can, so help other people understand. And you will rise by uplifting others. And that's the power addicts, right? So when you figure something out, you see people being successful, announce it to everyone else and help them be successful. Let everyone know how amazing they are. I have this thing, and I love the Avengers. I'm sure some of you are Marvel geeks on the call. I'm a Marvel geek, and my favorite character is Tony Stark. I absolutely love him. And Iron Man has always been one of my favorite superheroes, purely because he has no real powers, but like he's just brilliant and very clever. And Tony Stark said in the last Avengers film, "No amount of money ever bought a second of time." And I love that quote because it's really important to understand that when using the Power Platform, the more we enable makers, the more they will be able to save time. And the more things they can do and they can create to save them time, the more quality time they can spend with the people around them that they love and care about. Now, you're probably thinking that's super emotional, but it's very important because when you make things, when you build things, when you automate processes, and when you help people in your business, you're giving them time back. And that is one of the most important things in life. Time is a commodity, my friends. So the more you help, the better it is. So with that, I know I'm slightly over. I'd like to say a massive thanks to Mohammed and team, and a huge shout out to absolutely everyone else that's come along. Thank you very much for having me. I'm super happy to take questions, and yeah, anything you'd like to know about, any experiences you'd like to chat about, please let me know. And again, thank you to the sponsors: Magic Global, Guru Group, One Dynamics, IT Knox, and Stallion Solutions, and Microsoft. Absolute legends. Thank you very much, everyone. And yeah, happy to take some questions.
All right, guys. Any question from anyone? I know there have been a lot of things to absorb from Chris. Um, I know, Chris, you're traveling as well, so it's almost 4 minutes over anyway. Uh, Guys, any question anyone wants to ask? If not, Chris is always available on the LinkedIn anyway. You can always reach him out. And I think a couple of hours you don't respond. Otherwise, I would say 20 hours in a day. You're always responding, Chris.
Yeah. Oh man, I would love to respond to every message. What I normally do is I wait till Sunday and then I just like go through them all. But yeah, honestly, folks, if you guys need to know anything or need to hear about some of the painful things, believe me, what I've told you now today is not because I've just guessed it. I've delivered some really big centers of excellence and I've really banged my head against the wall a lot. So the things that I've shown you now are the main things that people ask me when we deliver. So if you need help, just give me a shout. Like I said, I'll do my level best to